Hi fashion designer, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you how to make this simple halter neckline. So if you want to know how it's done, stay tuned and don't forget to give this tutorial a good thumbs up. So right here I've already marked out my lines, my chest line, bust, the under bust line, including the waistline. So right on the waistline I'm going to mark half of my apex plus half of an inch, and then from one side, which is the center front, I'm going to mark half of an inch, and then right on the side I'm going to mark 1 inch. Also on the under bust line I'm going to do the same thing. Extend this line all the way to the under bust. Now moving on to the bust point line right here, I'm going to go down by 1 inch. This is to avoid any pointiness around the bust point line. So to create a dot, I'm going to join these lines with a triangle like so. And then right on the side, I am going to use my curve ruler. This is to actually give the bust that definition. So right here we are done with the bust. We're going to go right on the top. On the neckline, I'm going to mark a 1 inch. This is going to be the neckline yoke. So this is going to be 1 inch wide. Then right on the neck, we need to create the armhole. So right on the chest line, I'm going to mark 1 inch to create a armhole curve. So from here now, I'm going to connect here to the neckline yoke. So at this point, you can decide to mark the center line of the yoke or just connect it from the armhole line. So because we are going to be removing some piece right on the top, we need to tighten up the armhole. So I'm going to mark or go up from the bust point line, go up by 1 inch. And then from that new point, bust point line, I'm going to extend it to the armhole, which is where we're going to create a dot. So from one side, right here, from one side on the top, I'm going to mark half of an inch, and then on the other side, I'm going to mark 1 inch. So the total width of the dot on the armhole is actually 1.5 inch. So make sure you do that too. So now we are done creating the armhole or neckline for the front. It's time for us to move on to implementing our horizontal measurements. So over here, I'm going to mark 1/4 of my bust round circumference, and I'm going to add the measurement that is in the dot over there, which is 9.25 inch. And then I'm going to also add 1 inch for seam allowance. So right again on the waistline, you need to measure 1/4 of your waist measurement. Add the measurement of the dot, which is 1.5 inch, plus again seam allowance, which is 1 inch seam allowance. So whenever you take in a dot, make sure you replace it on the side. Then you just connect this line on the side, and the front pattern is complete. Now for the back, we need to mark the 1 inch yoke, okay, which is going to be 1 inch wide. And then once we're done, you need to move ahead to the chest line. Over here, I'm going to mark 1 inch just to create the armhole curve. And then once you're done, you need to now continue now from here to your neckline yoke. So at this point, you can decide how low you want your armhole to be. You can either mark from the center of the yoke and connect it to the armhole line. Depends how high or low you want your armhole to be. So because we are removing some part there on top, we need to actually create a dot at the back to avoid any bulging. So the dot width is going to be around 1/2 inch to tighten up the back part of the armhole. So I'm going to take around 1/2 inch, and then for the waistline I'm going to create a dot. Again, you need to mark half of your apex measurement plus 1/2 inch. And then from there, my dot for the back is going to be different than the front. So from the chest line, I'm going to go down by 1 inch and then connect this line. And then on both sides now, I'm going to create a dot width of around 1/2 inch on one side and then 1/2 inch onto the other side. So on the waistline, you need to measure quarter of your waist round circumference and then add that 1 inch dot width that you actually implemented on the pattern, and also add 1 inch for seam allowance. Now on the chest line, you need to mark quarter of your bust round circumference plus 1 inch of seam allowance. Then you're going to connect these lines for the side. Now here you're going to go in by half of an inch to avoid any bulging when you attach the zip. So this half an inch, you're going to connect it back to the neckline with a slanted line. So you're not going to make use of this line that I'm marking or creating X on it. So from this line now, you're going to add 1 inch for zip allowance. Don't forget to add also 1 inch on the neckline yoke. So all our pattern are done. It's time for us to cut out the patterns. So for the front and the back pattern, I'm just going to follow the lines as they are and also separate the yoke from the neckline. So I'm going to separate these two pieces for the front pattern. Now for the side front pattern, I'm going to add a piece of pattern paper underneath and then add 1 inch right around the armhole. This will help not to have any shortage around the armhole. Then I'm going to blend this back to the armhole line like so. Now the next thing is to trim off the dart from the center front pattern. And our pattern is complete. Please do not forget to create some notches. It's going to make it easier when you sew this pattern on fabric. For the back pattern, you're going to do the same thing. Separate these two pieces and then your pattern is complete. It's time to cut out all this pattern on a fabric. So I went ahead to add seam allowance right on the armhole, right on the center front, excluding the side. Okay, for the center front, I've added seam allowance of half an inch seam, and also for the yoke, for the front, I've added seam allowance except for the center front, and of course, including the lining, I did add seam allowance. And for the back pattern, I did add seam allowance except for the side. And for the yoke also, I did add seam allowance all around. Now I'm going to sew the lining first. I went ahead and I did padding on the bust line. And I took my side front pattern. I'm going to place it right sides facing. And I'm going to start sewing from the bottom. It's going to make it easier if you start sewing from the bottom to the armhole. And I'm going to sew half an inch seam allowance. So this is how the lining looks. You want to do the same thing for the main fabric. So I've already sewn the main fabric including the lining. I'm going to place them right sides facing like so, and then go ahead now and sew the armhole only. Once you're done sewing the armhole, it's time to actually go ahead and sew the back panel pieces. For the back panel pieces, it's almost the same process as the front. We're just going to take the side back panel piece and the center back panel piece and join them right on the side. What you do for the main fabric, you also do for the lining. And what I'm going to do is to take the lining, place them right sides facing, and then also go ahead and sew the armhole using a half an inch seam allowance. Now my back panel pieces are complete, and also I'm going to take my front panel piece, place them right sides facing. Now we're going to join the side seam. I'm going to open up my lining and place them right sides facing together, including the main fabric, and then go ahead and join it using half an inch seam allowance. And this is how the two pattern or the blouse is turning out. So now it's time to fix the yoke, and I've already attached the interfacing on the yoke. So I'm going to place them right sides facing like so, and then go ahead and sew a straight stitch where I'm actually placing the pins, and do the same thing for the lining also. So I've already sewn the seam, and now what you're going to do is to take both of these pieces, place them right sides facing. And once you do that, you want to go ahead now and sew a straight stitch right on the inside. And because this is normally a concave shape, you want to go ahead and create some notches. Take your yoke and your front petal pieces and attach them. Make sure that you do align the notches. So while I am pinning this neckline yoke, comment down below which other project you would like me to try. Could be an underwear, a dress, a blouse, a t-shirt, anything, even a trouser. I can try to actually make a tutorial on that. So going back to this halter neckline, I've already pinned it right here as you can see. So once you're done pinning it like so, you're going to turn your blouse the right side, and I'm going to go ahead and do a top stitch right on the seam, and this will help that the seam shouldn't be visible on the outside more but mostly on the inside. And this is how it looks very neat on the outside, and I went ahead and I tried it on me. I really love the color and the way it looks. The only changes I would have done is lower the neckline, of course, and take in the dot a little bit more by half of an inch. But as for the back, I really love it so much. So I really enjoyed making this project, and please don't forget to comment down below what do you think about this project. As for me, see you on the next one.